Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Shannon Thomas, CIO at Hamline School of Law. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. Technology and threats are advancing faster today than ever before. At Cyberlinks, we help companies leverage industry-leading technology to stay safely ahead of threat actors. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Shannon, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Mitchell Hamline and your role there as CIO?
Sure. Yeah. So Mitchell Hamline is located in St. Paul, Minnesota. We are one of the largest independent law schools in the United States. And I am the CIO there. I started in June. So it's been kind of a whirlwind lately. We're just, tackling a bunch of things and trying to tackle, the strategic plan and all of the budget and all of those things. And I'm also in the middle of writing my dissertation about women in IT. And I also have a little LLC on the side that just focuses on leadership. So, yeah.
So you're not busy at all, not doing a
busy.
lot, just kind of coasting. That's good.
No.
Getting a little R&R, so taking some you time.
I'm not
That's
a slacker.
That's not a slacker, getting stuff done. I love it. Well, you mentioned one of my very favorite topics, and that is women in IT. So I think this is a great topic that doesn't get nearly enough coverage, and I think it's wildly misunderstood. And so I would, since you're writing your dissertation on it, you are the subject matter expert. What do you have to say on the subject? I'm going to leave it really wide open for you.
I mean, I have, several pages on it, but
stuck in the first paragraph, and now you're being interrogated on it.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. It's super interesting to see how things have shifted over the years. We know that there's more women in IT than there used to be. We know that the role of women in IT has shifted dramatically over the years. We know that women are less likely to go into STEM from the very beginning of their adolescence and all through college and all of those things. And so there's all of these things that kind of go against women being in IT, and yet there's also so much value to having women in IT. We know that innovation happens best when there's a lot of diverse thought that happens and all of those pieces. And one of my favorite stories about women in technology is Margaret Hamilton with Apollo 11. And she kept saying to everyone, well, what if we get some of the calculations wrong? And they were like, we didn't get them wrong. We didn't get them wrong. And she said, okay, but what if we just have some backup stuff that, just in case? And so she had put code in to kind of take care of, in case something that they said would never happen happened, how would they keep things moving and have the critical pieces of equipment still work? And lo and behold, as Apollo 11 is trying to land on the moon, things went wrong, and her backups saved the mission, and it was a huge success story. And so there's all of these really cool stories about how women's contributions are really valuable, and it's not just women, it's women and men and people of color and all of the different ways that people kind of tackle things all coming together to have innovation and technology move forward. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, no, I think I couldn't agree more. And I guess the question that I think is most plaguing and baffling is why is it not, more widely accepted? Is it, and I'm going to encourage you to be as brutally honest as, as humanly possible, because I think the only way to address it is, just head on. because I think a lot of guys will say no, they're for it. They're advocates and they're all for it. And yet, if that were necessarily entirely true, then the numbers would be different, right?
Mhm.
It wouldn't be we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think a lot of, there's a well, I'm gonna stop with what I think. So I'm gonna ask you, go ahead.
Yeah. The why is always hard. So as a researcher, we can't find why very often. We do a lot with correlations. We can look at a lot of those pieces. The research suggests several things that are contributing. One of the first things is that women are dissuaded against studying it in colleges. There's a lot of research out there about how a lot of like the microaggressions that happen, especially in classrooms and stuff like that, really dissuade women. And then they get into their careers and the microaggressions don't stop. I still face them all the time. Like the amount of times that I have a vendor or someone who talks around me to a man who reports to me to ask what they think instead of what I think as the decision maker, is quite it's crazy to me because I mean it's
Ludicrous.
2026, right? And and I definitely trust my team on, like there are things that they are experts on that I will not know all of those things, right? And that's why we work so well together is because they are the experts there. But I'm the decision maker. And so just, like include me in the conversation. Don't assume I'm going to take notes. Don't assume, some of these things that feel kind of antiquated, but they're just little things. And then the other thing that's been really plaguing women is actually the mental load that happens at home. So there's all sorts of research that talks about how women's brains don't shut off. And there's arguments about is this biology or is this socialization? And, jury's out. It's probably a little bit of both. But that like, they're taking care of their children, they're taking care of all of the different pieces. And the mental load isn't just all of the physical work that happens at home, but it's all of the planning, it's all of the anticipation, it's the monitoring of these things. And then also the emotions that go with all of it and making sure that, my child doesn't want to go to school in the morning and how do I get him to go to school so that I can go to work? And, and so we have that kind of going against us, and technology is something that doesn't stop, right? So I mean, how many times like ransomware that they're not waiting until 9 a.m. So like, oh, they're in the office. Um,
Right.
like
Would be
it,
nice. I
yeah,
mean,
I would
fair's
love
fair,
that.
guys. Come on.
Yeah. Come on, bad actors.
Yeah.
We want you on our team.
Yeah.
But
Play
but
fair.
so like like the technology stuff doesn't stop. Like cybersecurity doesn't stop. We have to be watching it all of the time. And so it's really hard to go from the office and then go home to all of the different pieces that are at home when the office doesn't really stop and home doesn't stop. And so
Yep.
then it just adds on. And so there's a lot of women who leave technology because of the work that is involved in both of these things that are full-time jobs
Yeah.
and that need all of our attention. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why why we're more rare. And some of it is systemic and in at home and some of it's systemic in the workplace.
Yeah. I don't so what's the solution? I mean, I know they're pro if only it were that
Yeah.
easy. I know. But I mean, looking at it, I think, so it's interesting. I've got, a wife and two daughters. Fortunately, they're now finally off in college and the mental load is reduced, kind of all the way around. Very nice. So
Mhm.
I highly recommend it. It doesn't get
Yeah.
enough good press. Like, being an empty nester is the greatest thing that happened since you got your driver's license. Or
Uh-huh.
it's the best, or like since you moved out to college, it's the best thing that's ever happened. Like, no offense to the kids, they're
Yeah.
great. but boy, it's like getting your life back. And you get so much of that mental load just gone. The mornings getting even with, and our girls are the best in the, like just absolutely spectacular,
Mhm.
phenomenal students. They do their own stuff. And even at that, it's it's a challenge, right? To you just the load of like making sure they get off, making sure their doctor's appointments, the dental appointments, the orthodontist, all the other just the multitude of things, the laundry, the cleaners, the everything that has to get done
Yeah.
builds up, right? And so it's so nice when that's gone. But I, can't help but, think and wonder if it's like it seems more like it's a cultural problem where it's not why, how and why would it is it just like the women's mental load? Like I get it.
Mhm.
Your brain never shuts off. Mine barely turns on. It's a, so now we've got that diversity that we were looking
Yeah.
for earlier.
Yeah.
So that's great. Good teamwork. But how what do we I think it comes down to this cultural change that has to happen. I think the younger generation is doing a much better job, with the guys being more. I say this, but at the same time, they're also the ones that are the gamers that are online being complete, misogynistic assholes in games, and like, and it's just the reality. And then they go into tech, and there's already this kind of aggression and stuff that's built up. So they're not actually the solution. There's more of it, I think, in the younger generations, a kind of a tolerance towards therapy and equality,
Mhm.
than there were certainly in our parents' generation, right? But how do we get from, where we are to where we need to be to lighten that load? Because, you know, it's not fair that it should be so burdensome, and then they burn out, and then we as an industry lose the benefit of that diversity. So,
Mhm.
um, how do we approach that? You're like, again,
Yeah.
researcher, not.
Yeah. Yeah. So the research suggests that that the biggest component is allyship. So that looks different in different stages, right? Like the first stage of allyship is usually just like uncovering that this is a thing,
Mhm.
right? And so things like the unconscious bias training that companies do, like that can be a good starting point just to say, hey, I wonder if maybe you have some things that you just automatically assume. I do this too sometimes, right? Like I made a comment about, oh, like he must be so young. He has a 3-year-old. And I'm like, wait, I have a 3-year-old and I'm not that young. So like,
Yeah.
like we mentally shortcut things and it's totally natural.
Yeah.
It's human nature. But even being more aware of like the way that we shortcut things so that we can kind of talk through some of those things and being open to the fact that we might be wrong about
Yeah.
people. So like that's the first part is that we kind of open up that conversation. We acknowledge that this might be a thing. And then from there, then we find ways to support women in industry and in IT. So that could be looking at policy to figure out how do we support women with the mental load? Do we need to look at more paid leave? Do we need to change our work schedules so that they align with school schedules? Because as a parent, you know that, school starts at 7:30 and gets done at 2:15. Well, I can't get to work a full 8-hour day and then go get my kid in time, right? So we have to we have to look at childcare. We have to look at the entire system around the family unit that these moms are holding up, and how that functions, and what are we doing then with women in the workplace? Like, are we expecting the women to be the social caretakers? Are we asking them to run the social committee because that's what they're good at? Or
Totally.
or are we including men in that conversation? And and then you also have gender diversity on top of that. So it's not even just like men and women, it's looking at the whole picture to see, how are we including people and are we doing things that are fair? Are we finding ways to support women in the workplace?
Right. And I mean, the reality is that that is it always, you know, surprises me that the focus is always on, the women have to go and pick up the kid. Where's the dad? We shouldn't this be 50-50? Like, okay, he picks him up half the time, she picks him up half the time. Like, that's fair. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think seeing the employee as a person with this particular need at, okay, cool. They've got a kid, they've got to get to, whether it's a single parent or a married parent, right?
Hmm.
They still have this, certain requirements. And so I think there's got to be some, as a modern organization, you have to be looking at the human resources that you have
Hmm.
at your disposal. They have certain needs, and you need to meet those needs in order for them to be at their best. They're not going to be at their best when they're constantly stressed that, oh crap, I'm going to be late picking up my kid because
Hmm.
whatever that, I can't get the time off properly. So I'm always 30 minutes late to pick them up, and they're always feeling bad, and that adds stress. And now the
Yeah.
home gets, like, you can't, right? So are there still organizations that, obviously there are, that struggle with this, which is like, how
Yeah.
is that still a thing? Right? It is 2026. How are we, and why are we seeing it as a women's issue instead of a human issue where
Yeah.
this human has a kid, they have this responsibility they need to meet. Okay, cool. How do we work that? We like this human. They're great in this job. How do we support them in this to be better? I mean, I don't even understand why this is kind of, separated out as a woman's issue so much as is it like that Morgan Freeman quote where, I don't know if you've seen this, where he's talking with the guy from 60 Minutes. Have you seen this? This was a long
Maybe.
time ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago. He's talking, it's 60 Minutes, and they're asking him about, race relations and stuff. And he's
Mhm.
like, we're not going to get anywhere until you start seeing me as Morgan Freeman, the man, instead of Morgan Freeman, the black man. And I stop seeing you as Walter, it's not Walter
Right.
Cronkite, but
No.
whatever. Hey, right? I know, totally the same deal. The man instead of the white man, right? And so, and I think part of that is, you're right. How do you do that where you're like, look, they're just a person with that, and instead of always making it, oh, it's a woman's issue. Well, maybe we should hire fewer women because then we have fewer issues that we've got to deal with. We have a
Yeah.
human issue, and we still need humans to work here until our AI overlords handle everything for us, right? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Where have I gone wrong with this?
I no, I think it is a human issue. I think a lot of it stems from the way that leadership gets seen. And, I mean, it's fascinating. So like the research suggests that people who work um in women-led companies, industries, have like they have higher retention, they have less turnover, and they have happier work lives. And I don't know why that is, but I'm wondering if part of it is that there's a there's like a emotional taking like an emotional component to it. And so like when women show up as their best selves, they're taking care of each other as humans actually show up as their best selves. They're taking care of each other. They're thinking of other people. They're seeing how everyone brings something to the table, and there's this gendered difference in like how men lead versus how women lead. And I think it's just on people leading different ways. And it's fascinating to think like if we lead in a way that helps people be people first, then we get what we need out of them,
Yeah.
right? They're happier at work. They don't, like, and if we let them be people first, it means they can also take care of their families, And like I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I have a demanding job, and I'm working on my dissertation, and and I have my LLC. I have a lot on my plate. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about my boss is I'll say to her, "Hey, I'm working as I'm getting the kids ready. Like I get up, I get myself ready. I start working a little bit. I'm kind of running those things as I'm getting my kids out the door. And, I show up to work and it might be a little bit later than somebody else who doesn't take care of their kids in the morning shows up, but I've already been working,
Yeah.
right? And just because I'm like leaving the office doesn't mean I'm done working. And so because I've had that flexibility, like I probably work way more than someone who's just clocking in and out.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm happier and my kids are taken care of and there's this balance that happens. And so if we can think more in that realm of we're leading people, we're not managing positions, then that shifts how all of that works because then we can put the people first. And like we're in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which has been kind of crazy lately. Um
A little
and
bit.
and there's just been a lot of just like honestly like community grief that's happened and a lot of trauma and so even when I talk to my team, like some of my team members are really affected by this
Yeah.
and like some of my friends are really affected by this. And so for me to just be like, okay, but where are we at with that project?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Totally.
it's
Tone deaf.
so
Yeah.
tone deaf.
Yeah.
And then they don't want to work for me, right? But if I can say, "Hey, we get PTO for a reason. Take your PTO. What else do you need? Oh, like you just had a baby. Do you need food? Do you want me to drop things off for you? Like, what do you want? How can I show up for you as a person?"
Yeah.
Like and talk through some of those things. Like that changes the conversation a lot. And I think if we had more leadership like that, we would have way more diversity in the workplace because it would allow people of all sorts of lifestyles and families and to be able to show up a little bit better.
Well, I can't help but wonder, does this not all stem from, I think, two things? One, um, leaders with control issues, where they want to count their beans and bullets, not to show my old army ways, but they want to count their beans and bullets and have them there from 9 to 5, cool, where they can see them. Just because they're there doesn't mean they're getting stuff done. I don't care if somebody puts in 1 minute of work, but they exceed expectation all week. They've reached all their goals. They've all the milestones done, done, done. Blow the KPIs out of the water. Great in 1 minute. You know what? Enjoy the rest of your week doing
Hmm.
nothing or whatever you want to do. Right? Another LLC, another
Yeah.
dissertation. What? Why? So I think one, there is a lot of poor leadership that is still focused on, I have to control my people. I want to see them there. If they're not here, they're not working. What, how do you not know if they're working? They have deliverables. They're either delivering on those or they're not. That's how you know if they're working. And not the excuses they give as to why. Well, I'm here 9 to 5. I need more help. Okay, that's not right. So I'm not. So I think
Hmm.
that's one aspect of it that plagues companies today. And that's why we see this fight against working remote, because
Hmm.
clearly the benefits are there for so many companies, where AI can do so much of the work, obviously remotely. The AI is not there in person. It's getting the work done. It shouldn't matter where the body is, as long as the
Hmm.
work is getting done and the collaboration's happening. And great. And then the second goes back to what you said earlier, where you'll be talking to a vendor and they will go to the guy who works for you and talk to them. This kind of ingrained misogyny, this like it's, how do we combat that? Um, right? Because I think both of those things contribute to all of this. The reason the women-led organizations do so much better in retention and employee happiness is because those women are treating them like people, like actual human beings, and not, some resource that's supposed to have an X output and be there, and I can count them and I know they're working.
Hmm.
But they tend to work at a higher level, and trust more and be less of a, control freak, right? Fine. Um, but how do we combat the misogyny part of it that's so, ingrained in the culture? I mean, let's face it, how many countries have already had a female, president? And
Hmm.
here we are in 2026, and we're pretty far from it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's laughable how far we are from culturally being ready for that. Like, really? I mean, Philippines have been doing it for decades. Um, the Philippines, come on. And
yeah,
we're the greatest nation on earth, and somehow we can't do it. Like, we can put a man on the moon, but not a woman. Like, what? And not a
yeah.
woman in the White House. Come on. So how do we combat that? Because I think that's also a huge part of this, and it permeates everything.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where the allyship kind of comes in, right? I can say till I'm blue in the face, like I'm the CIO, you need to ask me, but I also need my team members, and they do. They're amazing. I need my team members to come in and go, no, she's the boss. Like she's like you need to ask her. Don't ask me,
Yeah.
right? And and sometimes that looks like re being really blatant about it for them, and sometimes it looks like just redirecting the conversation. But allyship is, I mean, the research suggests that's the biggest thing is allyship. And so, and I think it's like it's being an ally, not just like in meetings, but it's like in other places, you know? I think about a friend of mine recently got a job, and her friend worked there before she got the job. And so they, her friend was part of the interview, and she said, should we talk about it? Like, it's probably like bad form to talk about it. And her friend said, if we were men, we would talk about it. And
Yeah.
so, like, and so they talked about it. And she said, this is how you did well. This is how you compare. This is, some of the things that you can work on. And she got the job and it was great. But, like thinking, like, I think it's two things. It's like, we need the allies, and then we need to, I think there's some self-confidence and some things there for women that we can just like we can push in a little bit more than I think we've been socialized to do.
Well, I think we can all learn a great deal from Donald Trump. I think, not being political here, but I think that he clearly shows that with, enough self-belief and just doing something, that you can pretty much do anything you want to do. So none of us now have an excuse for not, right?
Yeah.
Just do it. Apparently it works, right?
Yeah.
It's a great example. A leader of the free world can just go out and do whatever the heck you want, and you can get there with this
Yeah.
crazy. And it's an extreme example, but I think it's an accurate one and a great one to say. And I know my wife does it with the girls all the time, and they're constantly like, well, guys do it, like Matt would do it, so why wouldn't you just do it? Like
Mhm.
100%. Like there is,
Yeah.
and I know that and sadly going right back to the culturally, we're raised differently, right? The boys don't cry, and like even from early ages, the things that we're so just accustomed to treating girls differently than boys.
Mhm.
Why? Like that we're culturally putting that on them. We're culturally saying that girls are weaker than boys and we treat them weaker. And so they end up being treated weaker and they end up being physically weak. Yeah, of course there's some level when you hit puberty and testosterone kicks in, but not for the first, you know, 10,
Mhm.
12 years. There's no reason. Like it doesn't make sense. You see those little kids who like have these climbing, gyms and stuff in their rooms, and these little girls are like flying around the rooms like they're monkeys. And, meanwhile, we can barely do a pull up, to save our lives, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a great example of how we just disempower, girls by how we treat them early
Mhm.
on culturally. Um, and I don't know how we fix that other than, you know, slowly over time, which is
Yeah.
annoying and frustrating you know, because I like things to be done quickly. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know, but how do
Yeah.
we?
But changing culture is like changing a river, right? It's definitely possible, but it takes a long time because, like you're moving people and people ha get uncomfortable, and, like, and that's true. That's true in an organization, and it's true more globally that, that it takes a long time to do that. And a lot of times the pain that we're in has to be greater than the pain of changing, or we don't,
Yeah.
because there's no reason.
I wonder if I have this take on movies and kind of Hollywood and entertainment that I think there is this whole art imitating life versus life imitating art. And I think that all too often it is life imitating art. And I think there's so much power that could come out of movies and TV if they you know, were to kind of set the example and normalize it because we know that's how it works. Most people, most interact. Let's fast forward a few years, and even more people are working remotely. How
Hmm.
much human interaction are they getting other than okay, the Zoom calls? But then all the other stuff that they're absorbing, where when we were kids, it was all day, every day. You're interacting, you're outside playing, but now the culture that you're absorbing comes from a screen.
Yeah.
So isn't it really on, the content creators, be that TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Hollywood, right? The movie, houses, the TV studios, isn't it on them that shouldn't we be producing better content that shows the world the way we'd like it to be instead of the worst version of what it is.
Yeah. Like the Barbie movie.
Right. There you go. Great
Yeah.
example. Right.
Um, yeah, I think that would definitely help. I also, we also have to be careful though, because as consumers of media and stuff like that, like we can also kind of enter echo chambers where, like unless we're getting some of that diversity, we could really easily just kind of, confirm our own biases depending on what we're consuming.
Well, I think that's the real downside of all social media right now. The
Yeah.
algorithm in its, infinite wisdom to keep your attention feeds you only what you're really interested in, and then it becomes this echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
But that's not really the case when it comes to TV shows and movies, right? They're kind of one off. It's intentionally produced. It's not, just quick content that somebody slapped together on Instagram or TikTok, right? A quick, video there, which a lot of that is sadly very toxic in all regards, right?
Yeah.
But people are consuming it by in mass quantities. So I don't know how we really combat that. I know we came here today to solve the world's problems, and and clearly that's the goal of this entire podcast. And we have
Woohoo.
very little time to get to figure it out. We've made very little progress. We've
Yeah.
talked about some of the problems, but we've solved nothing yet.
Yeah.
Um, but maybe that's all we can do is
Yeah.
that, is it just a matter of these having these kind of conversations and bring it up to where it is in the awareness of people, and instead of just saying, oh, not all guys. Okay, sure. I would never do that, but did you stop the
Yeah.
bad joke? Did you stop that vendor when he
Hmm.
he came to you and started talking to you for, to that instead of the female CIO? Like,
Yeah.
did you do that? Or did you
Yeah.
politely just reply to his answers and then think, well, that was fucked up? Be like,
Yeah.
or you could have done something right then. If you were a real ally, then you immediately stop and be like, no, that's rude what you just did there. She's the
Yeah.
boss, and why are you looking to me to kind of, usurp her? That's not going to happen, right? Things like that.
Yeah. And I think, and it doesn't always have to be overt because I mean, I'm in Minnesota. We have a lot of like passive aggression, right?
Right.
So, Um, so some of it doesn't have to be so overt to say like that's super rude. I can't believe you would mansplain to her how software goes on a device. That's kind of,
Yeah.
she's a CIO. I think she knows. But but it could also just be it could also be like a subtle shift, right? Where, like someone gets asked a question and they just go, I don't know, Shannon, what do you think? And shift it without having to be super in your face about it. But I think, like it's also like conversations like these, right? Where like how many people don't believe that microaggressions still happen? And that like sexism is still happening in the workplace. And people are always so shocked when I'm like, no, it happens a lot. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it can't. No, it does. Well, it's illegal. Yeah, I understand it's illegal. That doesn't mean that they're not doing it.
Yeah.
That and I think, it's fascinating to me how a woman who's direct is aggressive, but a man who's direct has leadership.
Yeah.
And we have, like I think it's in even just like how we talk about things. It's how we talk about Trump versus Kamala instead of Trump versus Harris.
Yep.
It's these shifts and it seems so like nitpicky, but it's pointing to something that's bigger underlying. It's not, to me, it's not like, well, I'm trying to split hairs. Yeah, but you know, people are like tubes of toothpaste. Like when they're squeezed, like when life squeezes them, like what's inside comes out. So if your first reaction is to call a woman who is being direct aggressive, but not a man, like that's showing me what's happening inside. And so it may not be something that you're aware of. It's that unconscious bias, but like kind of pulling that to the surface, talking it through and like let's talk about why that is. Tell me a little bit more about why you think that, women can't do the same things that men can.
See, that's why I go back to this Hollywood thing. I think that if we saw more movies with strong, female leadership where it was accepted and good, it was produced well, and it's a great story, and there's a strong leader, and it makes sense, and it's like great. And even though she was, a strong leader, meaning she was assertive, direct, all of these things that if a guy were doing it, it'd be like, great leader, but we don't see a lot of examples of that. And I think the ones we do see are, we see weak women. We see, the damsel in distress. We see all of these, whatever you want to call them, these tropes that
Hmm.
disempower women. And we're like, oh, that's the way to, because that's what you're seeing constantly. That's the reality. And so the rest of the world sees it as well. I mean, when they look at America, they see, oh, school shootings, because that's what hits the news. So like obviously all, everybody's running around in massive pickup trucks shooting everybody. Like that's not exactly what's happening. Um, right. But I think that that's really part of what we're lacking. And as much as Hollywood would wants to claim to be the, this great liberal and kind of forward thinking group, they're really falling far behind in this. I mean, by decades. They're still
Yeah.
barely out of the 60s, if you ask me. I mean, doing something like Captain Marvel, which I thought was, a really interesting movie. I don't know if you saw it. It's
Mm-mm.
strong female lead, but they kind of botched it in my opinion. It was the one chance to have a huge Marvel movie with a female lead, and it was fine, but it could have been great, right?
Hmm.
And it's just one example. I mean, there should be so many where you've got, a you know, where you've got these strong female leads who are acting like guys, and it's accepted, and the people around them show that it's normal and great, instead of like, oh, she's such a bitch. Like that's
Yeah.
not what, because she told you what to do.
Yeah.
Like come on. I don't know.
Yeah. But we also have women's sports and we don't watch women's sports, even though I would argue that some of the women's sports are better than the men's sports, right?
Sports, I think so. I have a slightly different and crazy opinion on sports because I'm not a huge sports person. But if I do go, if I think when it comes to sports, I want to see what is the absolute max. I want to see a monster who's been injecting steroids for like 12 years, who when he hits the ball, it just obliterates. You see the atoms come out of the ball. Like I want to see that. And I know the poor bastard's going to die in like 15 minutes after the game, and that is a horrible thing to do. But it's like, if you're going to get 15 minutes of my time, I want to see crazy stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
So you don't want to see normal people doing the Olympics.
I don't. I want to see the doped out crazies, the cokeheads going up there all tweaking, running the setting records that film can barely capture because they're moving so fast, and then they
Yeah.
instantly collapse to their death. I mean, that's so messed up, and I have lost every bit of credibility I ever had. Everybody's like, "Yeah, forget this guy. He's crazy." Um, Okay. But no, sports is a tough one um, because it's sadly when you go, like, I don't know, when you go to my daughter sings, she sings opera,
Hmm.
and she got invited to sing the national anthem at and I didn't even know this was a thing, a minor league basketball game. But apparently there's minor leagues, and it's pretty cool. But the interesting part was, being like courtside with these people who are like trying to get in the pros. These people are playing for their lives. I mean, they are leaving it all on the court, and it's cool to see the athleticism, right? The sheer like desire and the okay, cool. Like, and you see it and you're like, I couldn't do that. Or they make that look so easy. Um, and I think the challenge is, and what's really messed up is too many people are like, they want to see the coked out crazy, or the insane stuff. And so you're not really, if you're a true sportsman, if you're really into the sport, then you appreciate the talent of making that look easy. So the female golfer, the female, basketball player, then you appreciate that. We don't have a country full of I think you know true sports fans.
Mm.
We have a very sexist country. We have people who want it like, oh, the men do it better than the women, so why would I waste my time watching the women? That's because you don't really like basketball.
Yeah.
You're a sexist pig who just likes that. And you like football. Oh, really? I'm losing everybody now. Like, oh, you picked on, and I'm attacking like the entire country. Fortunately, I guess that hopefully this one's just you and me, Shannon.
Yeah.
But then you look at football. You've got these monsters, like they're monsters on the court, and then oh, and then suddenly they're out smacking, people around and beating up women, and that's okay by the NFL. Like, oh, that, you know what? Pay a fine and say you won't do it again.
Yeah.
Why are we not? How is that even acceptable? Did they not immediately lose their job? I'm sorry that you can't throw the ball anymore and make millions of dollars doing it. Think about that next. That'll be a good example for the next guy who thinks that he can just beat up, some some poor woman because he was having a bad day. Like
But do you
what?
think part of that is because we put people on pedestals, right? Like I mean, like so we have these like double standards where like if it's someone we don't really care about, it's totally fine if we hold them accountable. But if it's someone that, like, oh, they would never do that, right? Like, and so we have this thing where we put these people on pedestals, and because we can't fathom that that would ever happen, then it must not have happened.
Is it that, or counterpoint, what if you look back at college, high school, college, and then pro? In college, it becomes really clear that, and even in high school, that these student athletes are not even showing up for class. They get handed grades, just for showing up. They're not held to the same standard. And there are some, don't get me wrong, there are some absolutely phenomenal student athletes who are brilliant, and they are a true student athlete. But we've seen the institution you just cater to their every whim. Why?
Hmm.
Because they're driving funds, because everybody shows up for the games, and that drives funds to the school. It drives a lot. And same with the NFL. I'm sorry, the guy brings in a lot of people for the team. And so you're protecting the money. That's what this
Hmm.
comes down to.
Yeah.
And then there are these stars that then people put on pedestals, but the organizations and the institution that's creating these monsters and protecting them, that's not because they respect them or they look up to them. I think they're a money maker for them,
Yeah.
and they're protecting their cash cow, and that's messed up. Instead, you could say, I'm sorry, to be part of this cash cow, you have to adhere to these standards. That means you won't be out, beating people up on the weekends. Sorry,
Yeah.
I know high bar, but you're gonna have to behave like a normal human being, and you're gonna be
Yeah.
held accountable for that. Is
Yeah.
that is that so much? I mean, I don't know. That's what I think. I
I
think
mean
that
that I mean, so then really what it's coming down to is like capitalism and patriarchy, right?
mm, right. Now let's get everybody to hate us. So yeah, right. Um, but see, I think those two are highly misunderstood too, because I
I
think
agree.
at the end, it's not the patriarchy does better by having the since it's really like 51% of the population, having that 51% helping to guide and direct and as we discussed, everything is better with that
Hmm.
diversity in thought, in activity, in everything. And so, and then you look at capitalism, we do better, organizations do better when they are accountable, when they
Hmm.
adhere to higher social standards, because you want to be a part of that organization that is doing good in the world. So we already know that's crap, but it is a very common like enemy today. Like the
Hmm.
and people love to attack it. I think it's under attack because it's so easily misunderstood and because people abuse it. I think
Yeah.
organizations and people who are benefiting from the patriarchy, who are benefiting from capitalism, abuse it for their own benefit, and you get messed up things like now I've done it. The NFL, where they protect, players, just horrendous behavior. Like, how do you make that okay? What message are you sending to young people when that's
Hmm.
okay? And what's that do? Then you look at like going back to the IT portion of it, when it comes to those those esports players, where
Hmm.
there is so much misogyny there. There's so, and you look at in these in all of the esports in those games there, it's rampant. I mean, it is all over the place and it's not subtle at all. There's no microaggressions. It's very macro in your face aggressions, right? Against women, right? And it's part of it. It's part of the culture though. You throw like a girl. That's messed up, right?
Yeah.
And that whole thing, those words and the way we do it as a culture screws up women and screws up guys. Those
Hmm.
like and so
Yeah.
it goes right back to the culture. We're gonna fix
I
something here today, Shannon.
know.
We're doing it. Um, I I don't want to leave feeling like, ugh, we did nothing, right? We must solve this problem. Or I don't know. That's
Yeah, but I think too, like I think you hit something there that it it's not that it just doesn't serve women. It doesn't serve men either.
oh,
It doesn't serve anyone. It's not helpful. And it doesn't serve boys or girls and I have a son and I have a daughter, and they are uniquely themselves completely. And it, when my daughter's the younger one, and when she wanted Barbies, I had a hard time with it, and I had to like look into myself, right? And say, well, I wouldn't have had a problem if my son wanted Barbies. Why do I have a problem with my daughter wanting Barbies? And being like, you know what? She's a kid. She gets to play with whatever she wants to play with. If I didn't care if she played with trucks, then I shouldn't care if she plays with Barbies. And it's, like it doesn't serve her or him, for us to just like dictate to them, like let's figure out what they like and kind of like push into that. And I think, I had to really like check myself on that one because I like because I'm like I wanted my kids to be able to like be independent and do whatever they wanted to do and I would support them. And I don't care if they don't want to be in sports or if they do want to be in sports. I don't care. And then I was like, "Oh, okay, this is on me. I got to figure this out."
yeah.
And so like and I had to be open to the fact that like, oh, I also am putting my own bias into this and how can I support her as an individual regardless of what I think about these things. And it's crazy, parenting is wild. Um,
Yeah.
that could be a whole series of
It,
podcasts, but
it really
uh,
could. Yep.
but like I think it serves all of us to figure out how to support individuals. And not even think about it as a man problem or a woman problem, but to think of it as like a human problem and to really come at it as we are all better when we all get to show up as our authentic selves and our best selves. And so like how do we lead that as leaders? and that works as, like as managers and CEOs and, or even just like leading, our own selves or our children or, like I think it's really coming back to how do we support humans being humans? And then some of this other stuff starts to fall away.
Well, you know what? I think that is beautifully said, and perhaps makes me feel like we have done something here today. That we haven't just, I think we've accomplished something, and you wrapped it up so nicely there. So, Shannon, I cannot thank you enough for kind of putting a bow on all of that for me there. And before we go, could you tell everybody where they could find out more about you, and where they can find out more about Mitchell Hamlin?
Sure. So you can find Mitchell Hamlin at mitchellhamlin.edu. Our website is under constant construction, but we're working on making it beautiful. You can find out more about me on LinkedIn. You can find me under Shannon-RM-Thomas-MBA, I think, at
We'll link it.
LinkedIn. Or my personal website is inheritleadership.com. So,
Love it.
yeah.
Thanks, Shannon. And until next time.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.